Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shop Like You Give It Am interview on cotton. How is everyone doing today?
Super.
I would love for you all to introduce yourself very shortly. Can we start with you, Anne? So who are you? What are you doing? And what do you know about cotton?
So I'm Anne. I am a cotton consultant for a consulting collective called Cotton Diaries, and I'm in charge of sourcing and supply chains. So basically, I help brands and textile companies to find the right cotton fibers.
Wow. Okay. Definitely you have some knowledge on cotton then. Annie Wells.
Hi, I'm Annie, and I likewise come from the Cotton Diaries Consulting Collective. At Cotton Diaries, I am leading the communications and youth ambassador group that we have. So everything from the storytelling we do, from raising farmers' voices and centering them in sustainability conversations, to mentoring youth that are interested in changing the cotton industry for the better as well. I also have my roots in denim, which is heavily cotton-based as well. So cotton is definitely near and dear to my heart from the start of my career, I would say.
Great. Thanks so much. And Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I am working for DAWN as sustainability manager. I've joined DAWN, a Berlin-based company with a factory in Saigon, Vietnam, a year ago, and right now supporting in implementing our regenerative strategy and working together on an interesting project also with Annie and Anne, and happy to be here today.
Very happy to have you. And just to clarify, Dawn focuses on denim, right? Mostly.
Cotton is our main resource.
All right. So talking about cotton, what is a fact about cotton that people don't know?
If I can jump in, I have one fact that I love to share, that there are actually, I have an exact number, but ICAC 2025 book put out a stat that 20,985,410 people grow cotton around the world. So almost 21 million people are growing the cotton that are in your jeans, in your t-shirts. And I think it's really important to remember that there are these faces that are growing the fibers behind our clothes.
I mean, it's more people than live in the Netherlands. That's a lot if you try to visualize how many people that are.
Definitely.
So there's a lot of information about cotton, but is there one myth that surrounds cotton that a lot of people believe, but it's actually not true?
I think we all here come from the textile and fashion world. So those myths that we hear are mostly directed to the fashion industry. One in particular, like specifically to denim, is that it takes 2,000 gallons of water to produce the cotton needed for a pair of jeans. So that is absolutely not true, because cotton is very contextual. There are some countries that cotton is completely rain-fed. So we're also kind of looking at what type of waters cotton is using. It's wildly different in every region. It can differ from farm to farm in the same region. And there's not really one stat that you can use to scare people into shopping more sustainably for cotton. And also, I think with that, cotton has been kind of put out to be this thirsty crop, which again is not necessarily true. So those are two ones that really come out and have been really repeated in the fashion industry over the past few years. There's a report actually that Transformers Foundation put out that tries to debunk some of these myths, in particular this one as well. And we put some of the actual stats from different regions that you can kind of see the differences between growing practices. So I'd say that is a major one. And cotton does not have to be a thirsty crop. And it's not everyone knows they're using a bad stat, but that part of that report was trying to teach people how to fact check properly and find primary sources for information and data so that they're not perpetuating these myths in the fashion world as well.
Diving in a little bit deeper on this, if it's so contextual, could it also be that, looking at water usage alone, that certain regular cotton might even be less thirsty than organic cotton?
There's no actual proof that organic cotton uses less water than conventional cotton. Even when you look at the organic certifications, there's basically nothing around water consumption. There are points that make sure that water don't get polluted, because you are not allowed also to use synthetic pesticides or fertilizers to a certain extent. It's really controlled. And so you make sure that the water is not polluted, but the organic certification doesn't say anything about how you should irrigate, basically. So there's nothing that makes officially organic cotton less thirsty than any other cotton.
Okay. So what does make organic cotton better than regular cotton?
Well, if I may continue, so there are different aspects in organic that are really important. We can start with the seeds. The fact that organic cannot use GMO seeds, genetically modified seeds, that's a huge debate. GMO seeds in the cotton industry, like pros and cons, all of that, it's a huge debate.
What are a few pros and cons?
The most important aspect of it is that GMO seed, it cannot be reused. What I mean is that when you plant a GMO seed, you get a flower and then you get a ball of cotton, and inside this ball of cotton you have seeds, and you are not allowed to reuse those seeds every year. And so you have to buy every season new seeds. And usually when you buy the GMO seeds, you buy them from those big, usually German companies. I'm not going to name them, but you know what I mean, that also produce the whole package of fertilizers and pesticides that come with this GMO seed. And so at Cotton Diaries, we're really focused on farmers. And one of the concerns is the seed sovereignty. It's farmers owning their own seeds when they can, when it's possible, depends on the context. But so basically, organic enables you more to grow with your own seeds. It's so important. Imagine if you're producing something, but you don't even own the produce of this, and you cannot reuse it.
It seems wrong, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and you can end up in very difficult situations because you don't control the price of the seeds, and so that can create circles where you're just in debt.
That sounds really horrible. And would these farmers be able to regrow new plants with the seeds they have if they would be able to use the seeds they actually have? So would that be enough, or would they still have to buy more seeds?
No, if you were just growing with your own seeds, you could have enough. And usually what happens is that farmers like part of communities. And so when you have farmers who have their own seeds, they usually share a seed bank. It's something that is for the whole community. So if anything happens to your field, you might be able to actually use the seeds from the seed bank. So yes, so one aspect of organic is that one, is the non-GMO part. And then it's the fact that you cannot use toxic fertilizers and pesticides. And that's a really important aspect as well. So in terms of toxicity, health and safety for the farmers, toxicity for the environment, for the biodiversity. So this is all really important.
But why wouldn't farmers then all jump on the opportunity to start growing organic cotton?
It's a bit tricky. It's more complicated than that. So, for example, if you don't use pesticides and pest comes and your whole harvest is ruined, then you lose a lot of money because you've invested like buying the seeds, all the work that you put on your field, and something happens and nothing left. Also, even if the whole harvest is not over, usually organic, it's a bit trickier, and because you're more exposed to pests and you might have a soil that is not so fertile and you cannot use any kind of fertilizers, so you might have less cotton coming out of your land. So you're losing money. Farmers, in a lot of cases, their situation is that they need this money for the whole year. The cotton might be their cash that they're making for the whole year. So they only have one harvest. So only one a year. Imagine you have only one shot to make all the money you need for the year.
So it's mostly the pesticides and insecticide, everything that they need, and in exchange for using that, they become trapped in this loop of also having to buy the seeds, basically.
Basically, they might want to use this to make sure that they have enough productivity and that they protect their crops. And there's also a lot of farmers who only started growing cotton, maybe, I don't know, in the 90s, when there was like the green revolution and everything was pushing like for producing. And it's also lack of access to alternatives to that. If somebody comes to you and gives you the full package and tells you, okay, grow this, you're going to make some money, then you just do it. You don't necessarily know about the alternatives, or you just don't have access to it.
So how do these people get access to more organic options?
It depends on the regions and the countries, but you might have some programs that are going to contact farmers in specific regions and propose them to take part in their programs. That's what usually happens. Otherwise, you might have also just farmers learning from a neighbor and seeing what they're doing and then starting to do the same. What we've witnessed is that a lot of farmers check what their neighbors are doing, and if it looks good, they might try it. So sometimes you just need to convince one to try it, and if it works out, then it's gonna have like a ripple effect on the community.
But it's quite, challenging, I would say, because generally if you do like migrate from regular to organic, there's this gap of 3 years, right? Where the farmers basically cannot sell their cotton as organic cotton. It would be called cotton in conversion. And this cotton does come with higher risk of, crops failing. And also comes with less high of a yield when it comes to production of the fields. So that's quite the risk they have to take. So how does one convince them? I mean, there's a lot of upside. There's also a lot of risk. How does one mitigate the risk?
There is a lot of risk. Some programs might invest in those transitions, some brands as well. But I think in the case of a smallholder farmer, they wouldn't do this on their own out of the blue. It would have to be part of something bigger. They would have to have this incentive, knowing that even in conversion, they can still get a smaller premium, which is usually the case. When you sell organic cotton, you're supposed to get a premium on the normal cotton price, so an extra income in addition. But when it's in conversion, you don't get the full premium just yet, but it goes gradually up. But you would have to be part of a program to be certified as in conversion, like the whole process.
So they need the brands like, for instance, DAWN Denim to actually have a partnership. Yeah.
Commit, long-term
Who
commitment,
commit.
I would say. Yeah, there is a lot of risk on the farmer's side and a lack of support from the industry through commitments. It's really like the risk is laid on them, basically. And all the costs for this whole transition is also on them. And then on top is the retail dictates the prices still. And there is a lot of power imbalance in between. And then also when it comes to organic cotton, I have like 2 to 3%, right, is currently the organic cotton percentage on the market. And it has been this low for many years. So it's not growing for a certain reason. It's very complex. It's very difficult for the farmers. They need to be supported. It's nothing they can do purely by themselves. And on the other hand, also, we have like 70% agricultural land that is in a risk of becoming degraded. So it's like, okay, this doesn't really sum up. So that's why we think we need some more approaches beyond purely the organic frameworks we are looking at.
I've 2 questions. One, how does a brand choose which farmers they want to work with if there's 21 million to choose from? And 2, if there's farmland that's being degraded, shouldn't we prioritize that particular farmland to prevent it from degrading further? Because if we go organic, probably the soil will stay healthier. And maybe if we go full regenerative cotton, it would be even better, right? It would maybe even like reverse the transition to a desert-like state of the farmland. Maybe too much question, sorry, but they kind of intertwine, right?
Many answers.
But I think they start all at the traceability challenge because you ask how should we choose which farmers. Most of the brands, they do not know exactly where their cotton comes from, right? So neither do they know the current status of the soil. So it's really tricky to get to the tier 4 level and have that kind of traceability. So this is one of the big challenges.
Can you please explain
also
what tier 4 means?
Yeah, sorry. In our value chain, we have talk of tiers. So if I'm looking from a brand perspective, I'm the tier 0. And if I look upstream my value chain, so everything that happened before my brand, I look at tier 1, which is my direct supplier, which is in our case, our factory making our jeans. And then we have the tier 2. They're responsible to make the fabrics, the weaving of our denims. And then we have tier 3. And this is how we walk up the value chain up to tier 4, which is where the resources come from. And in our case, it's cotton fields. So tier 4 is the cotton fields. And they are often not even covered by general certifications we use in the industries. Very well-known certifications for organic cotton, they just cover the steps after the field. So it's a very tricky, complex thing. And if we do not have the whole picture, it's very hard to address, I would say, especially not with a single certification.
Yes, I think there's something really crucial to understand with cotton is that cotton is a commodity. So cotton is a commodity just like, I don't know, could be like oil. So the same way you're trading barrels of oil, you're trading bales of cotton. And the definition of a commodity is that it's a product that is traded upon its specificities. So if you want to buy cotton, you're going to say, okay, so I want cotton that has about this length, about this color, and some other technical aspects. And what you want is to get the best specs for the best price. But it doesn't take into account who grew it and how. So that's one thing. And so to answer your question on how do brands choose the farmers they want to buy from, they don't. Also, in general, you cannot, as a brand, buy your cotton from farmers. You cannot buy the cotton that's coming out of the field. This cotton has to be processed because this cotton is still with the seeds inside. So it has to be cleaned and the seeds need to be separated from the fibers. And this is called the ginning process. And that fiber is then put in bales, standardized forms. And those bales, they get like the quality of these bales get tested. And so you have that like spec sheet coming out. And this is how you're going to be able to buy it.
Are those bales always from the same farm?
No.
That's another
No,
challenge.
they're all from the same ginning facility. And that ginning facility gets cotton coming from the surrounding farms.
Okay, but they mix it from the different farms. It's not like this particular bale is going to go from this farm and this one is from this. It all goes together in one big pile.
Yeah, not always, but it does. Like, especially when you're in areas where farmers only farm like very, very small land size. In a lot of countries, like let's say India, which is one of the biggest cotton producer, I think the average land size is 2 hectares.
Yeah.
So from 2 hectares, you're only going to get like 2-3 bales of cotton.
How many t-shirts is that?
That's a calculation I would have to make.
Approximately like 10, 1,000.
No, it would be a few hundreds, maybe not 1,000.
So one farmer is maybe responsible for a few hundred shirts, and that's it. And that's his contribution to cotton for the whole year.
Yes, but it can also be completely different. You might have farmers in Australia who have thousands of hectares who could supply multiple brands for all their t-shirt productions. So you have very, very different scales. So of course, if you're buying from this huge Australian farmer, it's super easy to say, okay, I know who the farmer is. Like, this is this company. Well, then they have, of course, like employees and all of that. It's a big company. But if you're buying Indian cotton, like you're basically buying from a community, not from one person. So all the cotton from this community is gathered together, and this is what you get. We really vouch for getting to know the farmers, but it doesn't mean you have to know exactly who's grown your cotton.
You don't need to know their names, for instance, but it would be great to know the community.
Yes, you need, and it's super important to receive feedback and all of that. But I think deciding I want my cotton to come from this guy, and that guy. I think this is not realistic. But saying, okay, so I'm going to work with this group of farmers and I'm going to meet them. I'm going to receive like feedbacks from them. I'm going to have this dialogue with them so that I can make sure we have healthy business relationships. This is important. But you have to know that they're probably not only going to sell to you, and which is good because it's good that they don't only have you as a partner. And you never know, like from one season to the other, maybe one field is not going to produce as much. So you might need an extra cotton from somewhere else, or I don't know.
Safer for the brands themselves.
Yeah, of course, because brands, usually order to their factories, they order, 1,000 t-shirts. But you cannot convert that so easily. Into how many crops of cotton or how many hectares of cotton, because depending whatever happens in terms of weather or whatever is going to happen, the yield is going to be different every year.
It's going to be a mix. You
have to mitigate those risks.
I was just going to add on top of it in terms of impact too. Some brands may have that goal of knowing maybe they want to source from a large farm in Australia, so they know exactly have that traceability data, but is that creating such a large impact? Are you making a real difference? Whereas if you're working within these smaller communities that actually need more support, and we can have a bigger impact there. So it's almost like
supporting a super successful big business is something different than supporting a community of people who have a small little farm that need, our support. Which we can circle back to the question then. Maybe my question isn't how do you know which farmer to choose, but how do you know which community to choose if you want to help them make the transition to organic or maybe even regenerative?
First, I think I wouldn't use the word help. I would say either
Important,
support
yeah.
or create the right conditions. I think you have to find whoever is aligned with what you're looking for. So it goes both ways. It's really a relationship. It has to
No
be
white saviorism.
Let's try avoid that, because you don't want to create new, I'm going to drop the word, but it's like neocolonial
Dependencies.
behaviors, dependencies.
For instance,
It's really
DAWN
supporting.
you want to make a change and you want to work with a particular community, which you will probably have to not help, but facilitate and mostly support financially, probably, commit to a certain amount of money so they feel safe in doing the transition. So how does one go about choosing such a community?
Systems change. I would say we figured out we cannot trace back the cotton from our genes by going up the value chain and hunt down some certifications and figure out where exactly the cotton comes from. Addressing systemic issues, we were like, okay, we are not the right people to do this. Like, we would love to, and we want to impact somehow throughout our value chain. But this is also where we teamed up with Ani and Anne, because they have much more knowledge in this field. They're on the ground, they're talking with the people who are working in the fields. And it's not us coming in there saying, so we have another regenerative certification for you guys, where regenerative agriculture or farming practices can be also like very old school, like learned, like place-based logic you need to apply. Like, it's not us coming here from Berlin saying, okay, we want you to make sure that everything is according to organic and regenerative certified standards. So I think getting into a project together to figure out, okay, with whom can we work? Where do we share values? What is already there? Where can we have an impact, a positive one? Working alongside farmer communities, understanding their needs first. Because I'm not sure if it's their needs to have this certification XYZ or if it's a retailer's need to have it. So it's really getting on the ground.
What do you mean with that? Why is it a retailer's need?
I get many requests from retailers which certifications we have. Now around regenerative cotton, it's like, okay, we hope you have the ROC, which is regenerative organic certified certificate, which is super limited available, and it's really hard to get, and it's super cost intensive for farmers. There is not really thought about, okay, what is the real impact behind it on the ground, and what we aim with the regenerative approach, at least, is really to improve ecosystems on the ground, but also the local communities to strengthen them in a way by doing business. This is where I have a little bit a fight at the moment with the certification debates going on, where I think, okay, it's just a very complex topic and it cannot be solved. There is not like this holy grail of one certificate that is like solving the issue here. And as I said, like, organic cotton is very limited still. Regenerative is growing, but rather think thought and try to address this other, I don't know, the 4-something% of conventional cotton and even higher, what's with this 70% of synthetic fibers out there. Yeah. So instead of focusing purely on the certifications, try to understand the systems behind it and what is needed and how we can address it together.
And can we break it down, the certification stuff? Because a lot of brands, of course, they put a lot of time, money, and effort into getting certain certifications and staying certified. Of course, you have different levels of certifications. Sometimes you can get a whole factory certified. Sometimes only a collection or a certain material, or there's a lot of different angles here. And generally, I think what I've learned is that a lot of brands use certifications of, for instance, factories to discern, do I trust these factories to do things in a certain way that meet certain standards? And, that can make them feel really safe. And for, the consumer, does this particular piece of clothing, adhere to certain standards so that I can feel safe buying it. And I know I'm not exploiting certain people or even children. But then I hear stories like from somebody who was in a factory who came to the factory to check all the boxes for a certain very big certification. And there was a little boy working there. The boy was around 15 years old. That's an age I was also working when I was 15, right? But the certification said you had to be at least 16 to be working in the factory. And this little boy, he lost his parents like a year ago, and he was now working there so he could earn money to take care of his sister and go to school, which he literally did because the factory owner made sure that he did because he wanted him to have a bright future. But now this factory had a conundrum because this person who came there for, the certification said, okay, sorry, but I cannot give you the certification if you have this boy working here. And he's like, yeah, but what's my alternative? Do I have to put him on the street and make sure that he doesn't have money, no job, and can't have can go to school? What's more important? So it's really great.
Certifications, they address certain things, but they don't have any flexibility. And that's sometimes the issue. And I think what's important with certifications is that you kind of speak the same language. So for example, with something like organic, there's a legal backbone for organic. In the EU legislation, it states what is organic. So then when you get something organic certified, you have some level of common understanding of what you get. So that's kind of a contract, an agreement on where you're getting. But of course, there's a lot of limits to this. And the reason we're using certifications is because of the scale of the industry and because we have a textile industry that is so huge that you cannot control all of it without this system. But so back to also one of your previous questions on Anna, you said that working with us was also because we have more on the ground experience. And I think knowing your suppliers and all the situations, whatever might happen, that's really crucial. The concept that we have on relational traceability, I think this is our way to go beyond certifications.
Yeah, building that trust and going beyond that checklist mentality. We've been talking about checklists that are limiting. So having these relationships rather than going upstream, now we're trying to build the supply chain from the bottom up and creating these relationships so that we know what those challenges are and can the best partners we can be, because at the end of the day, we're all partners. So we should be treating each other as partners. So that relationship is what we really believe is the crux of what an ethical supply chain can look like.
It's really about getting to know everybody in your supply chain and getting also everybody speak to each other. The issues that we have found with traceability is that the supply chain is siloed and each link only speaks to its next direct link, but not the following one. So in a lot of cases, you have, for example, fashion brands who only speak to their manufacturers, and their manufacturers buy the fabrics, but maybe the brand doesn't even speak to the fabric supplier, and even less to whoever is spinning the yarn. Obviously, nobody speaks to farmers. And so what we're trying to do here is to reconnect all these people so that everybody speaks to each other. And once we create those systems, then we can actually make things work.
Do these systems already exist?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
You need to regenerate relationships, I would say.
Yeah.
It's because the fact that not everybody speaks to each other, not everybody understands the intentions. So, for example, if someone is trying to do something, maybe that special thing doesn't go all the way through the chain. And when there are misunderstandings, then this is when things get clogged. And then we all ask for information, but the information doesn't necessarily follow because not everybody knows each other and not everybody connects with each other. There are so many intermediates throughout the chain.
And maybe there's something very special in one silo that, that people really love and they want to communicate it, but then it gets lost in translation somewhere between the silos and then it's not communicated and nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. There are so many, probably so many initiatives that don't even arrive at the end of the chain. And so brands cannot even talk about it because they have no idea of whatever the person who grew their cotton did. Yeah, we have so much misinformation, but also miscommunication that needs to be sorted if you want to create those healthy supply chains.
I
So
think
that's,
too.
that's the goal, basically.
And of course,
What we
the
say
bigger
too.
the companies, the more complex the value chain, the more actors are involved, the harder it is. And maybe for a DAWN, relatively small, it's easier to say, okay, let's get to the core of all this. Let's understand root causes and go to the fields. Whereas for a huge fashion hub brand, like this can be very complex and very hard. That's where
Yeah.
they rely on certifications heavily to do the job. But yeah, as Anne said, it's relationships that really matter.
I mean, this move of trying to have traceability and transparency, but also to encourage regenerative agriculture or organic agriculture, I think it's a bit more recent. And the transparency aspect is super recent. Like we've seen a huge increase actually and a huge shift in mentalities. It's like people are starting to be a bit more open about their supply chains. It's really encouraging, but it's still very new. And the way companies are built doesn't really work to get this transparency. A lot of fashion brands buy finished products. So they buy a garment from a factory. Almost nobody buys the fabric, the zipper, the thread, whatever, and then pays the manufacturer to sew it all together. The most common practice now is buying finished products. So your manufacturer is also in charge of buying all the elements that are going to go into your garment. They're going to buy the buttons, the zippers, the fabric, everything. And
But
this
if
means
they are buying everything, wouldn't that mean that they are also, the one risking a lot of stuff and investing a lot of money for all these materials?
Of course. Do you remember during the COVID crisis when so many brands canceled their orders and you had all these factories, especially in Bangladesh, who were like, okay, so, but what do we do with all these goods that we've paid for?
Yeah.
Like we had to pay the workers, we had to pay all the supplies. And now you're saying you don't want them anymore and they're branded. So we cannot even sell them to someone else. So yes, manufacturers, they do take a huge risk by doing that.
Yeah.
So I think Anna said it just now. We have to regenerate relationships. That's maybe a good segue into regenerative cotton because we've not been talking about it until now, but we've been talking about, all the processes in this industry. But there's also a thing like regenerative cotton. And now, that's a project you're at DAWN you all are working on. But let's start with how is it different from regular or organic?
So between organic and regenerative, we've been saying like the easiest way to explain it is looking at it first inputs versus outputs. Organic is really looking at the inputs that you're putting in. So making sure, again, we were talking about it before, but no GMO seeds or synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. And then for regenerative, it's really an outcomes-based approach. So we're really looking to regenerate the soil, looking to restore soil health, bring back biodiversity, and looking at those outcomes of the farming practices. So it's not necessarily eliminating pesticides or fertilizers. There's obviously regulations within that and making sure we're not overusing synthetics there. But yeah, I think that's the best way we usually explain it is organic is this inputs-based approach and regenerative is the outcomes-based approach to farming.
Yes.
And then for us
organic-
also there is one more dimension where we think that regenerative goes a step further, and it's really looking at social dimension because indirectly you also strengthen the local communities and you have a better impact on farmers' incomes. And I think this is where it goes deeper to really the farm level in the approach than organic at this point.
So
Yes.
now we are indeed looking at farms and not communities per se.
No, it's still community.
Yeah, still communities.
It's still communities.
I just mean a lot of organic looks at the ginning stage, talking about certifications. They start from the ginning, and I feel the regenerative approach, although there is no standardized definition yet for regenerative, but I have the feeling it goes deeper on the people who are working on the field and not just on the commodity itself. No? Please correct me.
Yes. So first, you're absolutely right. There's no common definition for regenerate. It's a term that's been used quite recently, although regenerative agriculture is a practice that has thousands of years and that really draws from ancestral and native practices. But unlike organic, it doesn't have any common definition and legal backbone. So it's a bit hard to determine what it is. Yes, there's usually like an agreement around three aspects of regenerative, which is the biodiversity, the animal welfare, and the livelihood of farmers. Organic, as you were saying, the usual, like the label we use for organic certification in garments, it's usually GOTS, and it only starts at the ginning level. Before that, on the field, it's usually, let's say, the EU organic certification, which is an agricultural certification. And this certification doesn't have any social aspect. The GOTS certification throughout the rest of the supply chain does secure social aspects, but not at the farm level. So in regenerative, what we're looking for is to also include the social dimension at the farm level. But that's still a tricky thing.
So it's something that people are still figuring out at this particular point,
yes,
what regenerative actually is and how we should standardize it so that everybody can start working with it, legislation can be made, etc.
Yeah, but it's hard because, again, you can standardize it for a certain level, but then you have to look at the different circumstances, context. You need completely different soils in Greece than you need in India. So it's really this, in general, in the regenerative thinking beyond just the agriculture. We always say we need a context understanding. And also for DAWN, it goes beyond just purchasing or like just going into regenerative certified cotton, but we really want to adopt a business model that is looking into how can we regenerate the whole value chain, making a net positive impact in all these steps, not just on the cotton field. But this is where we now start, because it is literally the start. Ultimately, the end goal is to get everybody more resilient for the future.
Now, and I was wondering, because we spoke about the soil regenerating and regenerative cotton, or generally regenerative agriculture, kind of helps with regenerating the soil as well and making it more healthy and thus more sustainable in the long term. Is that something that's a big part of it as well?
Yes. It's crucial. I think that's
crucial
one of the
even.
main aspects.
Yeah. I think that it serves as such a fantastic opportunity for fashion to help with actually regenerating land, because oftentimes we don't see ourselves as maybe someone who could make that tangible impact. Yeah, if, synthetics, of course, take up half the market or more, but natural fibers, we have such a fantastic opportunity to do good with not just the social impact that we have, but also the environmental one we have.
I was wondering, do you think if we all jump on that regenerative bandwagon, is it reversible? Can we, reverse the soil degradation that is happening now everywhere?
It's going to be a lot of work, because we were saying, like, you have so many different contexts. So in some areas, it might be feasible. In some areas, it might be really, really difficult. It really depends. There's one thing that we've learned last summer. We were visiting Turkish farmers in the region of Izmir who were growing regenerative cotton. And one of the aspects that was kind of challenging to convince them was that they did not necessarily own the land that they were farming on. Many farmers were renting. And so when you're renting, you have to pay a rent. This is an expense. So you have to get that production right. So you have to make money out of it. And the risks, again, of losing yield was higher because it was not their own land. Also, would you see the point in regenerating the soil if it's not even yours? When you're
maybe if I intend to work for a long time on that particular piece of land,
Yes, then like knowing that regenerating the soil is gonna bring you higher yield. Yes, but
this is actually a thing. It will be a higher yield as well, because when organic you get a lower yield. Regenerative is more yield. Is more
in the long run. That's the aim. That's the goal. because if you increase the nutrients in the soils, then your plants are going to thrive.
That makes
So
sense.
that's the idea. But before you can actually regenerate the soil, you need a few years. And so that might cost you more than you're going to make.
And that's
So
where
again,
brands maybe be able to step in, financing
Yeah.
that particular transition period, right? And is that something that DAWN is doing, Anna? Is that what you're looking into?
Yes, this is what we are actually looking into with Cotton Diaries. We are already using regenerative cotton, but we would like to really find out, okay, can we have a farmer group we could directly work together with, and where we in the future have a long-term relationship and include them into our existing value chain, which is huge manufacturers who would like to commit to using more regenerative cotton. And by that, we could, even though we are small and we will not purchase so much of the regenerative, we can really have a huge handprint, convincing those two to work together and implement the regenerative cotton into our existing mill and spinning facility. And this is where we had some great research done by Annie and Anne on which cotton communities could fit the program. Maybe you want to explain. You looked into several countries, into risks. It was really interesting how we ended up with potential partners.
Really, we're looking at what the goals, of course, of DAWN are, and the social part was extremely important for DAWN, and that was something that Anne and I, with the Cotton Diaries community, kind of explored in terms of programs that already existed. There are lots of also logistical things that also need to be taken into account, but really it's kind of seeing what our values were, what we really wanted to have an impact on, and seeing who out there kind of fit the bill, I would say. There are lots of
Can you get a little bit more
programs out there.
specific? As an example, you had multiple countries and multiple communities you can choose from. So what are a few criteria you look at when deciding this is a fit for, in this case, DAWN, for instance?
Well, you first have some very technical criteria. You try to have a supply chain that makes sense geographically. So maybe not partnering with someone on the other side of the planet, trying to find more short distance supplies. Then you have also the technicalities of the fiber that you need for making your product. So that's another technical requirement. And once you've first looked at all those technical specificities, then you can get into, what are the priorities? So if you're looking for a program that is focusing on regenerative practices, but also securing incomes for farmers, you can add to that. So we basically agreed on a common list of values, and then we spend a lot of time meeting with either organizations or programs in these different locations that we had identified, and then from that we also discussed with them if they would be interested in teaming up with us, etc. And then this is how we basically found a short list of who we could work with.
And what is the one thing that convinces these farmers or farmer communities to go this route?
In general, I cannot speak for each of them, but I think, to be honest, in general, the first motivation is a financial incentive. We have to be real.
That it's covered for a certain amount of period of time. They get a financial support to do the transition.
You know that they're going to get a good price for the cotton that they've been planting, and if they know they're going to have the support in getting all the supplies, all the training, and secure an income that is decent.
And if the crop fails?
So you can have some systems it's unlikely that it fails, but those programs, they have some emergency systems for whether this happens. Yeah, it's a risk.
Shared risk.
Yeah, there are some systems where you could not just buy the cotton per kilogram, but also kind of pay the fee for the land that is being planted. So this way, no matter what happens, you also share some of the risks.
Yeah.
So there are different
You get a
methods.
Percentage of the yield, and not necessarily
You pay for the area that is being used, no matter how much comes out.
Yeah.
Or some of the fee is per land and some is per kg.
And you cannot use any cotton from anywhere. Especially in denim, you have certain technical requirements like staple length. We have tried some countries where we were sad that it didn't work out, but it's just the quality didn't match. So it's not like any cotton field can do the same and any cotton plant can do, because there's different cotton plants, of course. So this was also one big topic where we had to
and it
readjust
depends
also in the past.
It depends on your spinner as well. Like some spinners might allow some viable qualities, others won't. So once again, it's really about like gathering everyone and trying to find the best system.
One thing we say too is like we see it as like a supply chain, very linear, but we're more speaking about it as a supply web now because we are really part of this installation together. And it's maybe changes or shifts your mind and perspective of what your supply chain actually looks like. When you think about it like a web.
Supply web, supply network. It's a way to look at it.
I just generally think we have to think a bit bigger, and we have to understand the systems behind from all the steps in our value network, whatever we call it. We cannot just ask previous steps for a certificate. I think that is not due diligence. So we should really try to understand. And I do get that for consumers it's easy if they see a certificate. It's not theirs to really understand all of this. We need to provide this, and we have to do our job properly, and we need to think beyond these certification teams. Although they all have their reasons to be there.
To sum up what we've said, but it's going beyond the transactions and all these certificates and reconnecting and building actual relationships. And with relationships, you build trust. You also create those long-lasting relationships. And regeneration takes time. Even just switching to organic takes time, but regenerating land takes time. So it's really about reconnecting and recreating new ways of doing business, maybe slowly moving away from just buying cotton as a commodity, but remembering that cotton is actually a plant. So before being a ball of cotton, it's a flower. It's a really lovely flower. It's pink and yellow. And there's someone who's been growing it. And that person has put a lot of work into doing so. So summarizing that person's work with just a certification or no certification and saying that it's a thirsty crop, it's really simplifying the story so much that it doesn't really serve any justice to those people. So it's
beautifully
just,
said.
And just building on that, I think, it's moving from like this short-term thinking that we're used to long-term thinking. We're all used to convenience and having things like that, especially in this industry. But moving from that short-term thinking to longer-term thinking. And of course, with all the people that are involved in it.
Just a fun fact also, fashion has really short cycles. But if you want to sell garments with cotton that is going to be planted in April, maybe you will only have those garments in your shops in 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, if you were to commit to a group of farmers to buy the next harvest, you would have to commit to that before April. Depends on where your
production schedule
on the planet. But let's say you want to buy from Turkey before April, you would have to have this commitment made, and the cotton will only be harvested in October, November. And then by the time it goes to the spinner, the weaver, the manufacturer, and so on, it's only in 2 years' time that you will have this garment on your shelves.
And is it also true that they have to rotate crops? And they have the cotton and then they have to plant something else to keep the soil healthy. So then it would take even longer if you want to have a continuous stream of cotton, right?
Cotton only grows from, let's say, April to October. So that would be 6 months. So in some regions, when the climate allows, you might have another crop the rest of the time.
So the other 6 months you do something
cotton
else.
And then lentils. So you can rotate throughout the year. And then what farmers also do is that they have multiple fields and they also rotate. So maybe they're going to grow cotton for a few years on this field. and then for 1 year, they'll grow something else. But they would still grow cotton somewhere else.
On a different field. Okay, makes sense.
And cotton was a topic, and we are highly focused on new raw cotton. Of course, we should also increase the percentage of recycled cotton. Not just looking at organic and regenerative, but also how can we get a little bit less reliant on raw new material and increase the material that's out there already.
And then preferably post-consumer, right? Anyway, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank
it was
you,
really
Stefan.
lovely. I
Thank
learned a lot.
you.
And hope to speak soon.
Thank you,
appreciate
Stefan.
Thank you so much,
all.
Stefan.